Are you ready to unleash your full potential and become unstoppable in your success and leadership?
Welcome to the Unleashed and Unstoppable podcast, where we provide powerful insights and strategies for coaches, corporate leaders, and entrepreneurs. I'm Alexanne Carter.
And I'm Carol Register, and we're certified master neurocoaches who are passionate about helping you overcome your limiting beliefs and optimize your performance.
Each week, we'll be sharing actionable tips and strategies using neuroscience, from interviews with industry experts to solo episodes, to helping you lead a life of power, purpose, and possibility on your own terms.
Join our community of like-minded individuals. Hit subscribe now, and let's be unleashed and unstoppable together.
All right, leaders, I am so excited to introduce you to Danielle Levy. She is a sought-after business coach and strategist who helps 6- and 7-figure online business owners expand with clarity and efficiency. After experience in the traditional business world, Danielle established the Boardroom League. And I love this name for what you established. I just think it's so timely to address this and speak into this. And the goal really of the Boardroom League is to give other entrepreneurs a little black book of trusted industry professionals to help them grow and scale their businesses. So Danielle is here today to talk about claiming your role as the CEO and firing the Chief Everything Officer. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
So I know that you said this is, you love talking about this. So let's just dive in. When you think about the leader, right? And you think about the person doing all the things, where do we start really? Where do we start to claim our role as a CEO and fire the Chief Everything Officer? I love that. The Chief Everything Officer. How do you transition? Where do you start? Can you speak into that and help our audience really know, what do I do?
Yeah. I think even to take a step back, I think one of the hardest things is to actually identify that the Chief Everything Officer has been born, right? Because most people get into a business because it's the thing that they're really good at, or it's a passion project, or they've found initial success in it, and it's taken off in some capacity. And, it stops going from a hustle to oh my goodness, this is a real business and I can't keep up with it anymore. Or I'm getting into areas of things that I didn't sign up to do, even though it's my business and they have to get done, right? But you're in that momentum of the business and you have to literally look around and say, oh my gosh, what has happened? And how do I slow this train just for a second so that I can take a deep breath and figure out how to get myself in front of the business instead in the middle of it?
And I think you said something really key there. I get to slow down the train. Right. And when you're so into the day in, day out, and as you're kind of saying, the hustle, right? Almost finding yourself in this sort of reactive state of just moving things. When do you know maybe that it's the right time that, okay, it's time to take a pause? It's time to take a moment to take a step back and really relook at how you're doing things so that you do set yourself up for success, right? That you're not heading down this path to burnout, because essentially that's the outcome of that, right? And I've seen that a lot in my clients. I've seen a lot with entrepreneurs and coaches that I've been working with. And, we spoke earlier today about my husband really at that point with his business, and where do you identify that you can't keep going, right? It's not sustainable. And then where do you go from there, from that point?
Yeah. So I think the first place that any sort of leader typically sees it is when they think about why they either took the position or why they created the business. It's for freedom of time, freedom of money, usually, right? And when you've lost those things, that is a quick diagnosis that you're not in control of your business, because you're not in the business for the reasons that you wanted to be. And so that is a screaming red flag, in my opinion. A change has to get made. So in my opinion, CEOs, and certainly I recognize that money does not grow on trees, nor does expertise, right? Mm-hmm. But CEOs and leaders of any sort, and whether this is at the company level or at the department level, need to be responsible for the vision. They need to be designing the business. They don't need to be the doers in the business. They need to be that champion and spokesperson for the business, and that like key subject matter expert that gets brought in like as the true guest that everyone is just so excited for. There's a few other instances where I think a CEO or a leader needs to be there, whether it's signing the taxes or hiring the lawyers or some of that more kind of mundane stuff. But for the most part, everything outside of those areas that I just identified, someone else in the business can do. And I think it's really important for business leaders to be really clear on the things that they like to do, the things that they're not so great at. For the most part, anything that's a repetitive task needs to be handed off because somebody else can probably do it faster or better.
So Danielle, what comes to me right there is, and I was there too, feeling like only you can do it, right? Or feeling like it's easier to do it all yourself than it is to pass off and to delegate and to bring somebody else in, like just even looking at training and things like that. But what could you speak into in terms of that to support the leader to be ready for that, right? And embrace that to set them up for success, really, for that vision that they're creating for their business and their team.
Yeah. So one of the things that you just mentioned was, creating the time or the resources to train. And one of the things that I always really encourage people to look at is I do believe in spending the time up front to do the training, whether it's the videos, whether it's the SOPs, whether it's the training vault, whatever that is, that takes additional time. But the number of times that will be repurposed from team member to team member exponentially outweighs that initial time up front, and it ensures the consistency of what's going to be done. So, that's one thing I always say. And I also say, just in terms of delegating, it doesn't have to be like, I'm throwing it over the fence and I'm never going to see it again, right? Like delegate in a way that's comfortable, in the way that's highly collaborative, that you really still feel in control of your business and the work that's being done and the time that's being spent, because time and money are things that you cannot get back. And just kind of ease into it.
Oh, I like that. That reminder to ease into it, right? I think a lot of times, right, we're thinking that it's going to go right overnight. We're going to go from this to that. And so setting yourself up for success with that timeline, having things done ahead of time, I think is really powerful. I think I've also heard that once, like as you're doing the task yourself, record it. There's so many different tools available now for screen recording to record tasks and then, build your SOPs, which I think is important and a really important reminder to spend time on that, right? And in building, so that you have that for your teams. And you also talked about really leveraging, right? And then the speed at once it's all in place that you can then grow and to go back to that vision piece, which it is easy to get lost in, I think, as the leader, right? As the business owner. And we spoke a little bit earlier today about or you take a really big stand about how the leader or the business owner, right? They're not the entity, right?
No, they're not. And, I think making that distinction, at least, for myself as a coach and a consultant, understanding that the person that's actually writing my paycheck isn't my client, the business is my client, has served me really well because it's allowed me to have clarity in what is right and wrong decision making. It has allowed me to have those hard conversations with CEOs, with team members, because at the end of the day, we're all there to serve the business. We're not there to serve, an org chart or personalities or anything like that. And when you get really clear that the business is the client, everything is just so much easier.
Wow. Can you repeat that? Because I think that's, I really want to make sure that lands with the audience, because I've never really heard it and presented it in that way. We're so into it, right? And especially if we are behind the title and the name of the business, that we see it as us as an individual versus it being this entity. So yeah, I want to drive that message home, Danielle, if you mind repeating that lesson that you learned.
Yeah, no, just in separating the personalities and the org chart from what needs to get done in the business. And I think as managers and leaders, if we can lead with that identity, it allows us to hear a lot of ideas from our team and think about other just ways of doing business. And it makes a lot of really hard decisions pretty easy and pretty clear.
What were some of the lessons that you learned, like as you made that transition and had that shift for you?
It's really given me confidence in having the hard conversations more than anything. The numbers are what the numbers are, or here's what I'm seeing with another team member. We have to make a change of some sort, or, here's what I'm seeing in the way that you, CEO, are showing up in the business. There needs to be done with grace and kindness, of course. But I'm not so worried about hurting feelings anymore.
I was having some conversations recently, and a lot of it has been around having some of those hard conversations, right? That aren't always easy to have. And so it sounds like because you've kind of removed yourself away from that identity, as you said, it's been able to create a bit more of a neutral ground to be able to speak from. Yeah.
And I think it hopefully shows that I'm operating in integrity with the business, and I'm looking out for what is best for the business in the best possible way.
And what comes to mind when we talk about identity is the identity of the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind when you hear that, when you think about this identity as a CEO?
I've actually only worked with a handful of truly wonderful CEOs. I think it is a position that comes with an incredible amount of responsibility, and that very few people have the professional and emotional capacity to really know how to handle and to grow with. And I'm sure you've heard the stats that, so many businesses start stalling between 1 and 5 million because the CEO doesn't know how to respond to that. Or doesn't have the experience with that. And when I first heard that stat, it was so startling to me because, well, honestly, it made me a little bit sad. Like, you've worked so hard to get to that 7-figure mark, right? But as a CEO, you need to continue to evolve and grow. So it's a really complicated role to know when you need to be in the business and when you need to be in front of the business, and where you need to be so far out in front of the business, like maybe it doesn't even exist yet. And that's a really complicated place to be. But you know what? Like, that's an amazing place to be, right? Like, that's incredible.
And I think just the invitation to do that, like for everyone who's listening today, to put yourself back in that, right? Like, as you were saying earlier, like, you get to be the spokesperson for your, whether you're leading a team or a division, a department, or your business, like, you are sort of the face, so to speak, right? Yes. And just because you are the face, you also can still separate yourself from that entity and step into the CEO and representing whatever that is, which I think is a really powerful message, Danielle, that you've driven home here. And, as you were speaking, it was just literally making that total disconnection, right? Of stepping into that true CEO role and not being, the chief of everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's real easy to become the chief everything officer. It's also a real dangerous spot to be. So
kind of looping back a little bit, you kind of alluded it there and even spoke about it a bit earlier. Where does a CEO get to spend their time? Like, you talked about the vision and being the spokesperson, but, and sometimes I think what's easier is we're saying we get to spend our time there. So where should we not be spending our time? What are some things that those that are listening today can already start to look at? Okay, I can already start to delegate this and create more time and space for myself to be more the CEO of what I'm doing.
Yeah. I would say anytime the CEO falls into a doer role, especially if it's outside of their zone of genius or excellence, that is something to be mindful of. CEOs should be designing the business. They should be having those big ideas. They should be taking advantage of the networking and the JV partnerships and all of those things. So it's so easy to be in that comfort zone of being a doer or needing to be the manager of all things. But I would say that is not the best way to spend time.
With all the different businesses that you've worked with and coached, what are some of the common challenges that you see a lot of the CEOs experience, or some things to be mindful of as you're going through this transition, as you're looking at the delegation piece, and as you are stepping back in that more visionary role of the business and your team?
Yeah. I think I consistently see CEOs as bottlenecks, and it's about, first of all, identifying what those bottlenecks are, and secondarily, it's about understanding the root cause of them. Is it a control issue with the CEO? Is it a system or a process? Like, what is the root of that bottleneck? And then I would say trust or lack of trust, and how it displays itself is the other common thread that I see with CEOs. And to me, that says either that the CEO needs to let go, or there's not the right team members in the right seats at the company or at the department level, to be able to relinquish that trust and have it there. And so either way, I think it's about reflecting on the root cause of the issue, and then trying to figure out a plan to get around it, or over it, I should say.
Well, and I think that's more time. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying, I think something that you've really driven home today, Danielle, is time, right? Creating yourself time to assess and look at, where am I becoming the bottleneck, right? Time to really look at what is the source of what's happening. And when we are so reactive in what we're doing, we're not creating that time for it. And, you said earlier, right? The time is very precious and we don't get it back. And it's really important to create that space. And I mean, I'm guilty, right? Look at the calendar and it's got this and this and this and this and this and this. What can what can you maybe say about that? Or how can you guide the audience who is already looking at the already really full calendar that could be booked solid for the next couple months out? How would you support them in starting and addressing that, so that that's not something that continues?
Yeah. So I would challenge your thinking, and I understand that it takes the time to pause to recognize these things. But I think once you've done it, the amount of time that gets freed up when you're not the bottleneck, when you don't have people coming to you for the decisions, like, that's opening pockets of time on your calendar. And so to really look at ways that you can do that, right? I think that's just so important. And in terms of, creating those opportunities for more time, as individuals, we are the only ones that hold those boundaries for time. Even if we have an assistant, we need to direct that assistant on where to put those boundaries in place. And so to really think about, like, where is my time going? Even if it sounds like a silly exercise, like, track your time for like a week, right? Or maybe even a day. Like, see, it just will go poof and it'll disappear like you wouldn't believe. A time block only takes certain types of meetings on certain days, right? It's okay to say no. This doesn't work for me right now, but can we do it later, right? There's ways to manage your own time in a very, very respectful kind of way to ensure that you get the things done each day that you need to. I always encourage everyone to set yourself up for success the night before, so know what your main priorities are, but also under book. Instead of saying I have 5 things that I have to get done, only plan for 3. Things are going to come up. So always building in that buffer of time, knowing that you're going to get less done than you anticipated, knowing that something is going to come up. You're going to have an opportunity. Someone is going to need something's going to break, something like that. But to really, really be mindful of how time is being spent. And once you shift your mindset that you own it, as opposed to other people owning your calendar, it makes a real big difference.
So many good nuggets there, Danielle. Like the no piece, right? And that you are the owner of your time, and that you set that, and communicating that. I think that's what's important here, to is communicate that, even if you have an assistant, to support that, to protect that, right? It's such good juice, because I know that we hear it, and the idea of, time tracking, but it's powerful. It's powerful when you can get really connected with where's my time really going and being spent? Something that I have spent a lot of time with clients as well. And it's fascinating when you really look at where their time is going, how much of it is spent on things that are not moving the business forward, are not moving the vision forward, it's the busy work, getting caught in that busy work and then feeling so overwhelmed because you have so much on your plate, but yet looking back to your role and responsibility as a CEO, there's a misalignment, right? And you said something a bit earlier too about the CEO being able to imagine being somewhere that they haven't before, right? And I know as a neuro coach, like sometimes we get caught up in the busy work to protect us from that unknown because we've never been there before. So driving home the vision, right? It's going back to that vision, going back to the why, going back to, why you said yes to this opportunity, why you took the leap to put yourself out there and start this venture is something that is so important to be reminded of. And just that you get to be empowered with the decisions that you make.
Yeah. And I think it's real easy for it to go be like this fun, like adrenaline high, kind of thing to this isn't fun anymore, feeling burnt out. And it's really important to be mindful of that, like to keep your energy high and really driving the business, because that's where leaders are going to have the most impact.
That's where the leaders are going to have the most impact. Yes. Thank you, Danielle. So I'm very curious with your journey as a leader, as a CEO, if there is, looking back on your journey, if there's something like, what is something that you wish you knew sooner on this process that you feel like would have maybe saved you some time or supported you in your leadership and the growth of your business? Yeah. What would that be?
That it's okay to take big chances on myself. It can be really scary to have that confidence, but I can tell you every single time that I have taken the big leap, it has just paid off in ways that I never, ever would have imagined. And it's been such a driver for me when I look back saying, oh my gosh, I had no idea when I did this thing, it would lead to this, this, and this. So sometimes it's about just being courageous before I have the confidence, and that's okay.
Being courageous before having the confidence. Yes, that's beautiful. And if there's one single action step you would leave the listener with today to be able to move forward, right, in claiming the role of CEO and firing the chief everything officer, what would you say that would be?
Take the time each day to really intention set what they want their day to be like. And I'm not a terribly like woo kind of person, but I really think that is important. Knowing what your rocks are, what you have to get done, everything else fits in. And that's what really like forces the big leaps, which is what we all want, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Danielle. That's beautiful. So if the audience would like to connect with you more, where is the best place that they can, find you on socials or connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Danielle_C_Levy. That's probably the best place. And I always love a good DM, get back to all my messages. I always like to hear what resonates for people in these kinds of discussions. Love a hard hitting question. Just like to hear from people.
Well, this was jam-packed with so much goodness today, Danielle. So I really appreciate you being here and just sharing that your wisdom and challenging the listener to what they are experiencing, right? And not, I guess, accepting the status quo of what they're experiencing right now, but really stepping into that role of CEO, right? Making those decisions, being able to separate themselves from from being the entity, and looking at all the space that they get to create for themselves and the leverage they get to create, and being the spokesperson for their team and their business, and being able to create that vision that they have for themselves and also for, what they take a stand for. So I want to thank you for being here. And I also know you have a special gift for the audience as well that listened today.
Yes, I'm sure that you will provide the link, but it is the Delegate Better guide for any CEO or chief everything officer that doesn't quite know how to start stripping back some of those to-dos on their list. Hopefully it will help.
Oh, I love that, because I think sometimes, I mean, it's even part of like, well, where do we, going back to where do we start? What can we delegate? And I love the fact that you provide the audience with a list of just start here. And I think even if you're someone that has begun to delegate, it probably doesn't hurt to go back and look at other things that you can delegate, because it's so easy to get into our routine, right? And so I love that you provided the audience with this tool to help them, get rid of other things that are not necessary for them to do, right?
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank all our listeners for listening today. And of course, Danielle, for being here. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Unleashed Unstoppable podcast with your hosts, Alexandra Carter and Carol Register.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review, and subscribe.
That's all for this episode, Wildly Ambitious Leaders. See you next week.